Welcome to Copy Chief Radio. Today's show is a new breed episode where today's most innovative marketing and copywriting stars share their most effective methods for optimizing results in the fast-changing world of direct response marketing. To check out all the Copy Chief Radio episode types, go to copychief.com/CCR. Here with Terri Trespicio and her brand new book, Unfollow Your Passion. Unfollow Your Passion. It comes out today, if you're listening to this, the day it came out on December 21st. I highly recommend you get yourself this book. If you're feeling in any way stuck in your life, if you're wondering how to give yourself sort of like a permission, maybe not permission, just how do you stop following all the advice that is getting you nowhere and find out what you really want to do with your life and then actually have a path forward to do it. That's what this book is about. And I just want to say that I am in love with the writing. I'm really having a good time getting to know Terri. We were introduced by two people we both really love and admire. We're getting along famously. And so I'm hoping that you're going to hear a lot more from Terri through this podcast and other places. So Terri, thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much. Yes, our dear friend Laura Belgray, who is like, I want to say she's the Kramer of this podcast, except that, she's a lot less klutzy, though I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, right. She can burst through the door any second. Burst
in the door any second, as I'm saying. Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, I really am loving the book. I wrote to you to say as much, and I meant it. And, it's easy to dismiss sometimes books in this category because it feels like there's a machine out there somewhere that knows that a certain amount of them will get bought or something, right? So I'll just say, if anybody's thinking that about a book on this premise, why is yours different? What compelled you to write it?
I gave a TED Talk in 2015 called Stop Searching for Your Passion, which got more attention than I or anyone else expected. It has more than 7 million views now. And That's over the course of several years, though. That didn't happen. Please, people get that on TikTok overnight with their cat. I mean, now that's nothing. But because I built it up over time, back in the early days, it means something. And I knew that talk had hit a nerve. So I always had it in the back of my mind. But lest you think I sat down and started writing a book called Unfollow Your Passion. I didn't have the title till right before we went to print. I wasn't sure what to call it. And I wasn't writing that book all the way. I just knew, being a writer, that I wanted to write something. So I just wrote for years until I figured out what it was I was trying to say and then tried to sell it. That's when you find out what you're going to sell, is when you want to do traditional publishing. A publisher will tell you whether they want it or not. And if they want it, they usually have an idea of what they want to sell. And the fact is, you can't have a TED Talk that had 7 million views and not include that in your book. But the thesis of the book starts with that idea, that the pressure to feel you must know what you're meant to do, to have a purpose, to have it articulated and defined, and to have a plan for pursuing it is not how most people live their lives. And to assume we do puts a kind of pressure on us that we don't want. Ask a 20-year-old if they like being asked that question, but then ask a 50-year-old. No one really likes that question of like, what's your singular path? What's your purpose on earth? So this book addresses that, but then of course it's longer than a 10-minute TED Talk. So I went over to kick over every other piece of crappy advice I'd ever heard.
The way you go about it, right? It's instructional, but it's also very personal. I dare to use the word empowering, because as people can hear, just listen to the way you talk right now, you're very real. So there's no fluff here.
No. I have no tolerance for it. I'm gluten intolerant and fluff intolerant. And lactose intolerant.
And lactose intolerant. Wow, you're a lot.
I'm pretty intolerant.
It's hard living in New York City.
It's not useful, though. None of that stuff is useful.
No, it isn't. So there's a couple parts of the book. I want to ask you to read some things to us, because I want people to just hear the quality of the writing in your voice. And there's even just having started the book, a few moments that really had me like fist pumping in the air as I read, like literally, like, and that just does not happen very often. And so there's this idea about momentum that I think I told you in my email. This is the thing I tell my kids that if you take just less than one single word from all the stuff I'm always telling you, let it be that single word, momentum. So could you recap and read a little bit about the conversation with your mother when you were struggling after college to find jobs and get work and that stuff?
Oh, those were the most miserable years. The 20s, I thought, were really a specific kind of terrible. But after college specifically, like a lot of people, I felt at sea, having been told every year what classes to take and what do this, eat this, be with these people. And all of a sudden that was gone. And I didn't just go get a job because I didn't know what that should be. And I was afraid of everything, felt unqualified for everything, and basically was doing temp jobs and not doing anything of note. And I was miserable because I wasn't plugged into a group or community of any kind. And so I would call my mother every night, and she would pick up the phone and I would just cry because I was just unhappy.
Wow.
And I think it's not original. It's basically, and I was turning jobs down.
Right.
And she said, why are you doing that? I said, because if I take that job, then I'll be stuck there forever. I have this idea that when you take your first job, you're on a bullet train and that's it. And you can never get off. Right. In fact, right after graduation, one of my friends says, you better go backpacking through Europe. I go, why? I don't want to go backpacking through Europe. And she said, you have to do it now, because once you get a job that you'll never have more than a week's vacation, you'll never have a chance. I said, I'll never get to go to Europe if I don't go right now. What? Why did she say that? And it wasn't true. I've been to Europe many times. That idea is hurry up before you're locked in for life. And so that was the mentality where I was meeting my mother here. And I'll read the part that you picked out for us.
Yeah.
I had the mistaken idea that I was supposed to know what to do and that I had to know more or be more than I was to do anything of worth, and that I should figure that out first. One night over the phone, my mother said, honey, you don't plan your life, then live it. You create it by living it. Please take a job, any job. And so I did. I took a full-time job as an executive assistant at a management consulting firm. I needed the structure, the people, the benefits, the work. And that job, that basic office job, is what ultimately turned my life around and got it moving. Yes, I learned hard skills, soft skills. I learned to do things. But after a year or so, I also felt differently about myself and what I could do. It didn't matter that I had no interest in management consulting or that I would leave that job, which I did, and go back to school and get another job after that. The momentum began the way it always does, by moving. The direction almost didn't matter.
So good. Well, I love that. What a powerful moment. That I love that this came after weeks or however long of you calling your mother every night and crying to her. And finally that phrase, I guess, made it click, or eventually maybe in hindsight, you were like, that was the moment. But you don't plan your life, then live it. You create it by living it. Man, like if every person gets to have that belief and then act on it in their life, the world's a better place.
Yes, I believe it. And the only reason I could is because she told me. And so it's kind of like, well, if I could do anything, could I free someone else up to put less weight on the next step as the step? And it's just the next step. And then there's one after that.
Yeah. That's what, what I coach a lot of freelancers, and I just see them get so hung up on thinking that if they make a choice, they're announcing it to the world and it's permanent. Everyone will hear it. Dare they mention it on social media? Everybody will stop what they're doing and call them to say, what is this thing you just posted? You're calling yourself a what now? A copywriter? Oh
my God, no one cares.
No one cares.
In fact, I had a couple tank tops made up that say #no one cares. And I gave them to my sisters for Christmas, because we always say that when we're like, do you think it matters I do this? And she's like, no one cares. It's not meant to be. People go, oh, that's so terrible that no one cares. Like, no, it's a relief, because the moment you go public with your blog, it's like, yeah, and like, it's not it's fine. You risk less than you think by announcing to the world.
Right. It's so much work to get somebody to remember who you are, what you do, and why they should care, which is sort of a whole nother topic. But yeah, it's always funny when somebody's developing a website, right? And they're like, whatever you do, make sure no one can see it. before it's completely done. It could be live the whole time it's under construction.
The moment you flip it to live, what do you think? Is it with Black Friday and your website? Like everyone's like storming the door. Yeah. You'll be begging people to look at it.
Yeah, it goes live in Times Square. Everybody just stops and stares at it.
Wait, when I relaunched my website, which so what? You do it every couple of years and you change your pictures, you change your color palette, whatever. I did that like last year, and I put a thing on LinkedIn, and I was like, "Oh, I know I just did this new website." You know what happened? One person went over and looked, and she wrote to me and said, "I think we can both agree that that's not a great picture of you." And I was like, "What?" And she goes, "I'm actually afraid you're going to lose business." And I was like, "What was I? Am I trying to be a supermodel? No, but I mean, who cares? I went and looked at that woman's website. She's no great shakes, let me tell you." But like, the attention you get, half of it you have to disregard anyway.
Right. Yeah. And it's so funny how we only remember the one negative comment.
Well, I remember that.
We've both done stand-up. That's another thing we have in common.
Yeah, you did it for 10 years though. And I did it for I've done it for like a few years, like getting.
What does that say about me? I mean, come on, 10 years. 10
You're
years
a pro.
of working
That's what it says.
the Holiday Inn Lounge. But you know you know that moment where the comics are some club owners really want you to make sure you're line up at the door when the crowd's leaving, and you know what I mean, like let them see and all that. And so 150 people could all walk out and go, it was like the greatest show. You're amazing. Blah blah blah. One person they just walk by and they go, yeah, have a good night. And you're like, that guy hated me. He didn't even say anything bad. He just didn't say anything. And you're like, all you think about for 2 days.
Oh my gosh. Nothing will toughen your skin. I mean, I'm telling you, I would sooner, it's less nerve-wracking, I think it would be, to give a presentation on a Monday morning at 9 a.m. naked in front of 3,000 corporate people than it would be to be clothed in front of 20 at a club at midnight. I think that scene is the scariest. Because they don't give a crap what you've done. They don't care about your LinkedIn. No one cares. No one introduces you with a big hurrah. They're like, and.
Right. Just feel the arms fold.
Great training.
And nowadays with the phones, everybody's just, they feel, it's so weird that you would go to a live show where the person can see you, you can practically smell them, and sit there on your phone while they're performing, right? It's just very hard to ignore. Hey, it's Kev here. You and I both know that email marketing is one of the most powerful tools that professional writers have to grow their businesses and, of course, to increase profits quickly for our clients. My good friend Chris Orzechowski is one of the top email copywriting experts in the entire industry, and he's generated hundreds of millions of dollars with his email campaigns. He's built his own 7-figure business, going from part-time copywriting as a high school teacher to now running his own agency, building his own team of elite email copywriters. Chris is the guy when it comes to email that works, that sells. And now I'm very proud to have partnered with Chris to bring all his experience and knowledge to you in our new Email Copy Academy course. Inside this course, you'll learn email marketing 101 and market research, the anatomy of emails that sell, email strategy and campaign design, how to create product launches, and a whole lot more. Chris has personally helped me transform my own email marketing, and his strategies are straightforward, replicable, and reliable. So if you'd like to learn to do the same for your own businesses and, of course, for your clients, then check out the brand new Email Copy Academy. You can find it at copychief.com/ECA. All right, back to the show. Again, I want to focus on the books. I could talk to you about a million things. There's another over there they're on page 4. If you'll turn to page 4, Terri.
Good. Get out your hymnals.
But I love this where you talk about, and I won't make you read this part, but why you need this book stat. And again, it's just that every marketer needs to read this book because the way you frame things and the way each section builds on itself, but you have it broken down. I would almost call this like copywriting principles. Why you need this book. That's something every book tries to say, but usually doesn't say this directly. And sort of the crux of why people need this book is that they have this idea that they're, like you touched on a minute ago, they're supposed to know what to do. And they think somebody else might know what they should do.
Oh, God.
And then you say, the good news is no one knows any better than you. And the bad news is no one knows any better than you.
That's the truth. I think the moment I realized I was grown up was when I realized that no one knew anything. That anyone, I assumed, I'm like, well, the grown-ups know. They got the grown-up manual. Everyone got the instructions about how to be a grown-up.
Right.
When you get there and realize that no one actually knows. I was very sick and I got very sick very quickly. I went into sepsis, like a septic state where you're almost going to die in my early 30s. It was just this freak thing. No one knows how it happened, but I was hospitalized and they are, every team is coming through and trying to figure out what's wrong. And no one knew. And I was like, but don't they know? Just like you think the doctors know, you think the grownups know. And my mom, who was a trained nurse, and was a nurse for many years, she was like, honey, everyone's taking their best guess. Wow. So if the doctors see you almost dead and they don't know how that happened and they're can't even agree on what it is, you think your uncle knows what you should do for a living? Like,
right.
No one knows.
Right.
But that's good news to me because that means, hey, what do we have to lose?
Exactly right. There's nothing worse than following what you thought was good advice and ending up miserable. Sort of like what your friend told you. If you don't backpack to Europe right now, it'll never happen. Now, I do say that, I have to say, to people who are about to have kids a little bit. It's not always true because you really do get to choose how you live. Obviously, people travel with small babies all the time. But I will say, once the kids are kind of in school, about half your year is kind of planned for you as far as like how many adventures you'll be taking, because you can't just, you know what I mean?
Of course.
And so there are times it's relevant, and I do feel like, it's nice to do things when you're younger, but this, the whole world's quitting their jobs right now, Terri, right? This book couldn't be more timely for that reason. What do they call it? The Great Resignation. How many people didn't, at least in the US, didn't go back to work after pandemic because they were like, this was the dumbest way to live. What was I doing? Getting in my car and sitting there for an hour twice a day to go somewhere I hated. And so everybody's asking the question that this book answers right now. So what do you say to people who are like, how do they start to form a plan once they sort of like have permission that it's for them to decide?
Well, I think it's harder. That study, it was a famous study about choice. And when they gave the study participants 4 kinds of jam to choose from, it was easy to pick, right? You have 4 kinds. But when they gave them like a wall of jam and they're like, here's 50,000 kinds of jam, something like, I don't want to quote the study, it's been a while since I've seen it, but it was harder. And they did, people get overwhelmed by too many choices. And when you give them just a few, it's just more effective, right? This idea that, and I'm reading things about it that like, not everyone's quitting in white collar world, but the people who had like real much harder jobs, let's be honest, like who were miserable or like, wait a minute, I don't know if this is worth my life and time.
Right.
It's not like, what do I do next? Meaning you have to consider every single option in the world. But the way I say is to start right where you are, not find some passion like an elusive Easter egg out there. Like you've got to go hunting to invent a whole new thing you're going to do. But like, well, what have you been doing? What if that is fun? What if you took this and did it for these people instead? For instance, I was just talking to a woman who was in property management, commercial real estate. She hated it. She moved to New York right before lockdown and then didn't have a job. She was like, I hate it so much. I don't want to do it. But then she started doing project management for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, people who were like, I can't get my brain around this. She's super organized. She doesn't have to do commercial real estate. She took those skills and said, oh, I could support X number of entrepreneurs, help them get clear about their stuff, and I can make a business from that. She goes, why would I ever go back to an office job if I can do this? That does appeal. I know it appeals to a lot of this community, this idea of like, can I do it on my own? Yes, but you don't have to invent a new product and have it manufactured in China. What skills do you do well? Don't tell me they can't change shape. We're like a gallon of milk. We can take on almost any shape. You pour us into anything. What's hard is figuring out what shape is this milk meant to be in? Well, it's not meant to be in any one shape. You pour it into what's available.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. And sometimes people like get so wrapped up in an identity or a title. Like I've seen this a lot with
Yes.
copywriting because, copywriting's a pretty cool thing to be, frankly. The idea of being good at it, you sort of have these magic goggles that you can see through and understand people's motivations and understand how to position things. You do this. I want to get to this. The brand ambassador work you do, a brand.
I'm essentially a copywriter
with their voice. Yeah, right. Those are great adventures. I want to get to those in a second. But I once had one of the first people I coached was actually working on doing some work for me, right? He's transitioned since. But at the time, he was really wanted to be a copywriter, but kept all his work was in WordPress development, right? And he liked that work. He wasn't miserable there, but I felt like he was pushing the boulder uphill trying to become a copywriter. And I finally said to him, I said, you don't dislike the WordPress work, right? Like, so why not maybe combine the fact that you can write copy with those skills and allow yourself to just be that and let go of this idea of wearing the badge of a copy. I kind of made him think about and gut check, like, do I love the idea of it or do I actually want to be that,
Right.
And so often, like you said, the skills we have are already there, but we think we have to get to the back of some new line to do a new thing that we want to title ourselves, And
it's like the career DMV, like
yeah. And with a little bit of creativity and guidance, which again, this book provides a lot of, you can suddenly see that, like your friend, I don't have to keep doing the thing I hated or even stay in that industry, but I can take other things that led me to be successful at that. Sometimes an ability we have keeps us succeeding in a thing we hate. And we have to recognize what's that ability and where else can I put that?
That's right. What's making you miserable? You might not hate real estate. You hate your boss or you don't like the vibe of that place. And people go, well, I'm really passionate about surfing and I'm a writer, so I have to write for a surfing magazine. You could surf on the weekends and write for a dog walkers magazine. And it would be great because you happen to love those people. So we don't consider all the factors. And this is what, of course, Seth Godin would call like an industrial age hangover, where we think because we've come out of the age of, mass production and everything should have a label and sit on a shelf. We think we're supposed to widgetize ourselves and be like, well, I just do this and this is what makes me cool. No one job or thing makes you cool. You decide. I mean, I used to be like, I like being a magazine editor and I was a radio host and I could say I did those cool things. Those were great cocktail party jobs. That's fun. And then when I was let go from those jobs, I was like, well, now what am I? It's the identity. It's the ego that's creating this torture. When really, I'm still me. I still do what I do and I still do what I'm good at. It just looks like something different. And that's the key. I mean, Michael Roderick, I don't know if you know him. He's a brilliant writer. He helps people write too. And he says, he calls them white label skills because you can take them from one place and they transfer really well to other things, especially writing, but really anything that you would need to communicate, whether you're a graphic designer or a website builder, all those things, if they need to be done, someone needs them.
Right. Exactly. Let's talk about comfort zone a little bit. Chapter 2 is why you can stay in your comfort zone, which is a pretty counterintuitive, not what we've heard. We constantly hearing, got to get out of your comfort zone. What's your argument against that?
Listen, I hate this. I basically listen for advice that just rubs me raw after I've heard it 80,000 times. And I go, why? Why is that the case? That's not even true. I think it's a little privileged to assume that we need to just, once in a while, we should be uncomfortable because you know what? We're so damn comfortable all the time. Are you? I'm not. I prefer comfort. I like to be dry. I don't like to be hungry or wet or yelled at. If given the option for legroom, I will always take it. Show me someone who wouldn't. There's no one who doesn't crave and want some shred of comfort in this life. Since the moment we were born wet and naked into a room full of lights, screaming, crying. Like it was not comfortable from the wake up. So like, don't tell me like, I'm sorry. I always, and maybe this is, I don't know. But when people are telling me like, you have to get uncomfortable, I always think it's kind of broy. And I go, and first of all, I will just say, and not to you, Kevin, but to men who like to bark at people to be uncomfortable, especially a man telling a woman to be uncomfortable. Like, really? Why don't you try being me? It's real. It'll get real uncomfortable for you. So I don't love that. Here's my take on it. Yes, I endure discomfort. We all must. We spend most of our lives holding a cafeteria tray, looking in the room with no idea where to sit. That is human experience. If you can find any comfort, great. And so I not only seek it out and stake it out, I look to expand my comfort zone so I can fit more in it. I just want a bigger place. I'm not trying to leave every second. And here's why. If someone says, well, if you're uncomfortable, that's how you grow. True, I didn't get good on my Peloton by not riding it, but I didn't do it to be uncomfortable because look at me, bravado, I love suffering. No, I did it so that I could be more comfortable in my body, which I am. Same with stand-up. There's nothing more uncomfortable than doing stand-up comedy. And I didn't do it because, I'm going to do something that scares me every day. Thank you. I hope you have a miserable life doing that. I would like to do a thing so that I get better at it. And I did it so that I am not maybe entirely comfortable with it, because who is? But I aim to become more comfortable, because that is where, and I didn't make this up. Look up some of the research. Look at Marcus Buckingham, one of the best writers in the business space. And he studies people and the management of people. And he says, while you're out of your comfort zone, you're also desperately thinking about how you can get back inside. And it's inside the comfort zone that you are most productive, most focused, and where you thrive. That's where I want to be.
That's great. So good. So the book, I could go through every chapter and have a whole episode. Unfollow Your Passion, Terri Trespicio. Get it on Amazon, anywhere you get books. It came out today. If you're listening today on the December 21st, this is an amazing gift, as you can hear from Terri. Like, who in your life needs to hear this? Get them this book. Get it for yourself. Read it, know it, share it. Help others, help yourself. I want to talk a little bit about your speaking and the brand work you do, because what a cool career it seems like you're having. Are you having a lot of fun?
I am having fun. And because I like to make things up as I go a little bit. And I like to know that I'm not locked in and I can do what appeals to me, which, by the way, I recognize is a very privileged place to be. But I worked pretty hard to make sure that I could do it, that I could keep doing it. But let me tell you, I was on Zoom before your mother was. I've been on Zoom for years. Before everyone knew about it, I should have bought stock. I didn't even consider it.
I know, me either. We lived here. We're all like, my kids are coming. I'm like, have you heard of Zoom? I'm like, what do you think? I'm talking to myself in the middle of the day? Of course I've heard it. That's all I do. I
was built for lockdown as a Gen X introvert who was working alone already. Yeah. Well, what about it? What can I tell you?
Favored us. Were you speaking already before you got the TEDx talk? A lot, like for years? Yeah.
No. I was new. I had just I was kind of figuring it out. I was doing some talks, but I didn't quite know. I wasn't sure what I was doing. I'm sure a lot of them I was doing for free at the time. But after that TED talk, it did help kind of power up, because now people have a place to see you.
Right.
And so that did kind of stick a very big engine onto my news career. But I had been speaking a lot, any opportunity I had. And this just increased and up-leveled visibility. But I did get to speak, and I have spoken at recurring events. And that's how I knew I was doing, a good job at it, that I was growing. I mean, you could get lots of speaking gigs, but if you're invited back year after year to speak at events, and that's how I knew. I was like, I have relationships with these events, and I got to get in front of a lot of freelancers and designers and writers, and they've changed my life too. Like, I'm glad I could entertain them for 45 minutes, and they went on to change me and change my whole business.
Yeah. What have you learned about speaking that when you look back to when you started, that's the most
First of all, you do not have to be born to do it. You do not have to be naturally anything. If you are, great. That's an advantage you have. But speaking is a skill, and you can learn it. So if it's interesting to you, anyone who's listening, I can't tell you, nothing has grown my own business and visibility like speaking. And you might say, oh, well, now we're in this hybrid world and it's all Zoom. So what? I've done as much speaking as I have before. I'm just doing it all the time online. But I think we get mixed up. We think it's giving a talk. I'm going to give a talk. Like, people get very formal when really all speaking is a scaled up conversation. That's all it is. And you do have something that you can share and teach and empower people to do. And so I learned that there was a demand for it. And I also got better and better at working with event planners and saying, tell me what you're looking for. What's the goal? Asking the right questions and being easy to work with. What's your goal for this audience? What's the audience's goal? What would you like them to do? Do they pay $10,000 a plate? Are you trying to sell something? Make sure, I said, think of me as a tool you're plugging in to the overall event, and how can I help? And that has helped me, because it's a business like any other. People do business with people they like.
That's a great, it always goes back to the pro code, doesn't it? Like, you can stand out with your skills and abilities, but it's the dealing with you. People.
You could have a silver tongue, and if you're difficult to work with, you're done.
It's funny, a friend who's pretty high level stand up, and he likes to ask when he's to the stage crew at theaters, who's the worst?
Who's the worst what?
Who's the worst to work with? Like, who's the biggest asshole or whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's so funny how it ends up being a handful of names. Everybody has those same names, Yeah.
I spoke at a jewelry conference earlier this year. I knew they'd had I won't mention her name because she's a big name author and speaker. I go, wow, I got big shoes to fill because that's who you had last time. And they're like, oh, she was such a bitch. They're like, we hated working with her. And after I gave my talk, who didn't exist to them, I am not famous, none of that. And they were like, you were the best speaker we had. Why? Because you talked to us, because you gave us real things to think about and do. It really is about what you offer. So don't get hung up on like, oh, you have to be a big deal. Forget that. Yeah. But the brand work, how that connects is that in a lot of places I get to talk about my particular perspective of branding, which is going to be different from anyone. Do you know how many people do branding? A lot. But I said, well, what's the thing that bothers me about what most people say when they talk about branding? Well, you have to find what makes you different. I go, no one knows what that is. You want to get a boring answer? Ask someone what makes you different. And they say, what makes you different? They'll tell you a list of things that literally everyone else says. So I've learned to ask a lot of questions in order to get the best out of someone as a writer. And then during the talk is when I talk about what I learned from them. So the talk is a way to metabolize your business and to circulate what you do and to share who you've worked with and what you learned from them. And a certain degree of humility there also shows that you're there to learn, not just because you think you're a smarty pants. And yet I go up there with some pretty strong opinions about what I like and don't like about the way people think about branding. And that's been really helpful too. And I'm telling you, the minute I walk off stage, people are like, well, can we work with you? I'm like, yes, you can. That's very encouraged. And that's what I'm telling you is the power of getting in front of people.
Yeah.
Everything.
I love it. And I know that you also empower the people who work in it every day to share their stories and perspectives when they often go unheard, like the people, whether in the C-suite or the salespeople on the ground, right? That is so brilliant because I think you mentioned to me, like, once you do that and you're essentially asking them, what's it actually like? How are you actually helping people? What does it mean to you? They own the story now when they see it presented back to them.
For context, yes. When I get into a room or a virtual room, I've done it virtually too, a lot. And I work with a group and they're like, we're trying to figure out who we are and what we stand for, what we say. They love to give you a list of values. They love to serve up some word salad. Oh, excellence, empathy, compassion, discipline. We're so into those things. I'm like, oh, really? So no axe murderers here? So you guys are all just really good people? I'm like, that's great. Guess what? That's the floor. It's like, okay, so what else? You can't ask people to describe themselves. They can't. So I go, forget all that. I forbid it. I said, we're not talking about branding or marketing. I only want to ask you what it's like to work here. I want to ask you, like, I'll give them a prompt. I'll say, what's a time you were working with a client and it clicked for them and you could tell they understood the value of what you do? Here's 10 minutes, go write about it. And they're not necessarily writers. It doesn't matter. I make them sit quietly. I don't want them to be talking about it. I want them to sit and write out, and they'll write scenes with real people. And then I have them all read it out loud. And we all acknowledge, like, all right, what did we hear in that story? That's a great story. Oh my God, Louise, I didn't know that happened with blah, blah, blah. And then I use their stories to come up with the original thing. But it's not that I'm making it up. It's pulled from their story DNA. I'm not the first person to say how important story is for branding, but the process of getting it out of the person, out of the client, means that they feel they own it from the beginning. I have to warn copywriters, anyone who's a creative, who's coming at a place going, you're a bunch of dummies, you don't know how to do this. Please just do what I'm telling you. It's way more artistic. They don't want you coming and telling you who they are because their bodies will reject it like a foreign object. Your goal as a freelancer, as a consultant, is to lower their immune response so that they can take in what you're saying because they hired you. They want your ideas, but they're resistant but that's not us. They never say that to me. I never hear, but what you did is great, but it's not us. Never. They go, wow, this is ours. We're pretty great. We're pretty smart. I'm like, yes, you are. They can own it. I got paid to do the work. Let them own it or else they'll never use it. They'll pay for a nice thing you created. It'll sit on the shelf and they'll never wear it, just like a dress that wasn't their style. Don't be a tailor of artistic dresses no one wears because no one will wear them. You want them wearing things they love so someone else can go, who made that for you?
So good. Wow. You are, you're brilliant. Really. I just love the way you think and say things. You say things good, Terri.
I say things good. That's the job. Well, remember, I got an MFA in poetry and I studied beats. I studied words and lines. And for a long time, I thought that was now I feel bad that I spent all that on my education. I'm not a poet, but in fact, I am because all writers are to some degree, right? Yeah. They study and they love language. That's why I say for copywriters, if I know there's a lot of copywriters listening, if you want, and you say this too, if you want to get good at copywriting, what that means is getting good at writing. So rather than being like, how do I say optimize in a smarter way? Read more, write more, get into the guts of real story. And there's no mistaking great copy that has a pulse, that breathes. That's always the stuff. Whenever you go, I don't know how to write this, I got to be smarter. No, bring it way down to the level of a pulse. If you put your ear to the language you've written and you don't hear a heartbeat, it's not going to last.
So good. You can feel it when it happens. And that's usually how it gets responded to because the reader will feel it too. The energy of it literally does travel through pixels and through every other medium you want it to travel through, but it has to start with that.
Totally does. It's nothing you don't already know, Kevin, but it's like it always bears repeating that we need to feed the creator in us in order to create things for other people.
That's right. Yeah. You got to have that motivation and you have to give time to that. It's always amusing to me when somebody says they feel guilty because they've been doing a lot of surfing or whatever, horseback riding. I'm like, what do you mean you feel guilty? Like that's when you're going to get your best ideas. That's part of your job description.
And not everyone loves to read novels, but read whatever you like. But like, I do read a lot of novels. And for a while I was like, I'm not writing novels. At least I haven't yet, but I'm like taking time to read this. And I was like, should I be doing this? And I was like, this is where you keep reminding yourself of the craft of story. And you'll just read something and go, oh my God, that was so good. That always intensifies your own ability. Every time you hear a word, I'm reading a book now that's amazingly written. It's by Gary Steingart, Our Country Friends, I believe it's called. It's very popular right now. And I was like, I don't know about this book. I think it thinks it's too smart. Then I was like, no, you're just mad that you have to look up a few words every once in a while. And I learned new words. And I was like, but now they're mine.
Right.
This is our language. We get to own it and use it. But if you're not discovering, you're not watching it used masterfully, it's hard to use it masterfully yourself.
Yeah, love it. All right, Terri, thank you so much for this. I want to respect your time, and I hope we do many more of these.
I hope so. I love it. And I really am so glad I got to meet you too, Kevin. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Good luck with the book. I know it's going to do great. I'll be telling everybody about it. It is out today. Unfollow Your Passion. Get it wherever books are sold. We'll talk soon, Terri. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, don't forget your goodies. Head over to copychief.com/copychiefradio to get some great free stuff to help you put the things you hear on the show into action for your business. Copychief.com/CCR.